Oh, look, my slide is up. Good. We can go. Let's take off my reading glasses. I'm an old guy, as you can see. I wear reading glasses. That doesn't mean everybody who wears reading glasses is an old guy, but I am. Anyway, so this is a talk. It's called A Small World After All. It's going to be really fast, because I only have 45 minutes. I can do this in a whole day if I want to, but I only have 45 minutes, so I'm going to go really, really fast, right? So bear with me. This is a good time to wake up, because otherwise you miss half of it. So I created an alternative title slides, which is basically this one. This is my girlfriend Kim, who's sitting there, who's going to do a talk on security later today. And again, we drove around in a tuk-tuk yesterday and the day before. It's really small. I barely fit in, and I'm not that tall, actually. If you take the average people in the Netherlands, they're like this big, and they don't want to even fit in the driver's seat anyway. So this is it, right? So let's start off. As you probably all know, times are changing, right? Technology is changing our times fast. This is Bob Dylan in 1964. He's a lot uglier now, but back in 64 he said, times are changing. And that's interesting, because if you look at our industry, the software development industry, the IT industry, we all recognize this particular slide, right? This is Moore's Law. Now, Moore's Law says that the number of transistors in a dense integrated circuit doubles approximately every 2 years. So you think our capacities and the possibilities we have in IT sort of grows linear, but this is not a linear scale, right? This is exponential, which means that the possibilities we'll have are going to rise extremely fast. And I'll give you some examples. If you would have ordered a laptop online, let's say at Amazon, in 1954, it would end up on your doorstep like this. This is a bit big, right? And this thing has less computing power than my mobile phone has today. Right? Even this little thing, this device here, might have more computing power than this little thing. When I started programming, in the 80s actually, so I've been programming for 37 years, I used to program on a thing like this. This is called a personal computer. The first ones arrived on our doorsteps in 1981, right? That opened up a whole new era of us being able to write code at home, basically on 64K bytes, right? We had 64K bytes to write code in, right? And we actually did that. It was a lot less fancy than it is now, but we still did it. Then in 2006, the world changed again. Not only could we compute at home, but we could compute somewhere else, right? Other companies like Amazon basically started this thing in 2006, and Microsoft and Google and IBM and all the others followed really soon. And this opened up a whole barrel of new possibilities, because it allowed us to write code and run code and store data on somebody else's computer. And that somebody else's computer was a lot bigger than the computers we have in our basements. That meant that a lot of other people could come into our field, into any field basically, and change everything. So we have to talk about disruption for a little bit. I'll give you some small examples. For instance, if you look at how fast technologies got adopted, that rate went up tremendously, right? If you look at airplanes, it took 68 years before 50 million people sat on an airplane, right? And it took 18 years before 50 million people took money from a wall. That's basically going to disappear soon, because nobody takes money from a wall anymore, at least where I live. Everybody pays with plastic these days, right? But it goes faster and faster. Look at Facebook. It took 3 years before they had 50 million fans, probably 50 million likes. And then Twitter, 2 years, right? Now Twitter, of course, went back to like 10 users these days. But so if you look at technologies, look at the fastest one, right? Pokemon Go took 19 days before 50 million kids on their mobile phones could use this technology. To be able to do that, technology was quite different than when we started with airlines, right? And this is basically where we are in now. I'll give you one more example. This is the Dutch fintech landscape. These are 430 registered startups in the Netherlands, where I come from, alone. 430. What if one of these would be able to say, you know what I'll do? I'll build an online bank. I'll build it with like 3 engineers, a UX designer, a mobile developer, some QA people, we'll run it on Azure or on AWS or on the Google Cloud, whatever. Could you do that? Do you think a startup like this could do that? Well, the answer is yes. And startups like this have done this exactly, right? In the UK, there's a bank called Monzo. They do this. In Germany, there's a bank called N26. It's an online bank. And they're even cooler because they have transparent credit cards. Who doesn't want a transparent credit card, right? And it went on and on, right? So that, this is in Dutch, but this is the CEO of the ING. The ING is one of the bigger banks in the Netherlands. They're actually big international. And he says, well, basically, the startups, I don't worry about that too much. But what if companies like Amazon and Azure, or Amazon and Google and Facebook and Apple will get into payments as well? What will then happen? Because they have the possibility to do stuff. Now, then Apple says, you know what we'll do? We'll introduce a credit card. By the way, which is even cooler. I'm not that big of an Apple fan, but they have credit cards that don't have a number on it. Just your name and nothing else, right? It's actually pretty cool, I think. And it gets worse, right? Other companies could come into the field as well, like AirAsia. They said, well, you know what we'll do? We'll start international banking as well, because we do lots of payments and we have the computing power somewhere else. We'll start payment services as well. Why not? Now, this is becoming to be a big challenge, right? And then even Facebook, right? Facebook announced recently that they want to start their own currency. Currencies were basically the domain of countries, right? Countries have currencies. This is a company that tries to get a currency out. Now, of course, as we all know, this is an error I got on my when I tried to post something on Instagram. Facebook seems to be having a problem right now. Yes, they do, right? They have lots of problems. But the thing is, everything changes. And as a result of us, in technology, we come to a world where everybody, anywhere, at any time, big, small, wherever they come from, could enter any market potentially. Now that is an interesting challenge, right? That means we will have to change everything we do and the way we do it. That means us, in software development, we have to figure out where we are. Now, what have we been doing for years and years and years and years? Now, I've been in this field for slightly over 35 years, right? That means I've seen a lot of projects, a lot of failing projects as well. And the problem is that we tend to build up software, feature by feature, stacking the next feature on the next feature, putting a bubble here, putting some stuff there, putting some stuff there, and it grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. Dynamically, organically. And it grows over the years, right? Your software does not break when you start building it. The software basically breaks like 15 years later, because a lot of people will have worked on it with different ideas, different architectural ideas, different coding skills, and different requirements, and we change the software altogether. As a result, we'll end up with legacy, right? Everybody has legacy, basically. And it's not necessarily a problem if you still can maintain it, if your architecture is still okay, if you have automated tests for everything, which we don't, then you would be fine. But we're not, right? By the way, this is one of my favorite buildings in the world. It's in Rome, it's the Pantheon. It's 2,000 years old. This is legacy, but it still works, right? This still operates as a church. And it's a magnificent building. I don't believe that any of our software will still be around in 2,000 years, especially if you look at where we are now. So I looked at the stack of my current client, and it looks like this. This is the technology they have on board. Now remember, or I haven't told you yet, this is a company of 100 people. 100 people that have to maintain all of this technology, right? That is a challenge. That is the challenge called legacy. And the question you need to ask is, so now what we do, right? How do we continue? If everything's changing faster and faster and faster, and we're building up more and more legacy, where do we go? Now, this is where we get to the point. My point being, we have to do stuff differently, very, very differently. And I'll try to explain that to you in the next 35 minutes. So this is me. My name is Sander. And in Dutch it's pronounced Hoogendoorn, but nobody can pronounce that anyway outside of the Netherlands. It's a strange language, so don't bother with it. I'm basically a dad, a speaker, an author, and a traveler, and I am a freelance developer. I've been writing code for 37 years. My current favorite language is TypeScript, which I love a lot, actually. I usually do freelance CTO jobs, and programming and architecture jobs. Currently, I work for a small IoT company in the Netherlands. They build smart thermostats and a lot of platform around it, as you saw the stack, which is an interesting challenge. We're trying to move them towards microservices, but that's not the topic for today. There's other talks today on microservices. And I used to be working for Capgemini. I traveled the world a bit for Capgemini, being their global agile thought leader, figuring out what was wrong with agile projects around the world. Well, a lot, actually, but I'll try to tell you that. So this is my Twitter tag, my website, my email address. If you have further questions, just tweet me or email me or LinkedIn, whatever. So here we go. What I think we should do is we should start to move to building smaller features and delivering those features almost individually. That's the first step. And the second step is we're going to do that in even shorter cycles. If you are in waterfall projects, you will move to more agile projects. If you are already in agile projects, you will move on towards something like continuous delivery. And we will do that with different sized teams. Instead of having really big teams or scrum teams, I think we will move to even smaller teams. And that is the part that I will try to explain to you too. I will skip the microservices part for today because that's beside the topic. So, there we go. First step. Delivering small features. Now, there is a model that I have to explain to you first, which is this model. It's called the Keynote framework. And it's an interesting model because it actually helps us figuring out where we are in the world and how can we tackle the problems that we have in that field. So let me briefly explain this to you. There's 4 zones, or actually 5 zones in this diagram. It starts with the obvious zone. Now, in the obvious zone, if you have a problem, there is a single best practice. I'll give you an example. If my sink is full of dishes, I have to put them in the dishwasher. I have kids, but I never manage to be able to get my kids to do it. So I have to do it myself. That's the single best practice there is. That's what I'll do. Right? I put them in the dishwasher, I switch it on, problem solved. There is a single best practice. You're there. That is easily manageable, right? Those are the projects that we can manage, that we can create a plan and say, this is what we'll do. We'll do it. We're done. That's easy stuff, right? And then there's the complicated zone. Now, in the complicated zone, there is not a single best practice, but there's a whole set of okay practices. Like, for instance, if you do identity management, you can go to any of the leading providers like Active Directory on Azure, or you can do AWS Cognito, or you can go to some well-known providers like Okta or iWelcome or whatever you have, or you can build it yourself, right? Don't do it, by the way, it's too complicated. I tried, it takes a lot of time, actually. So there's a lot of possible solutions to the problem. Now, that means you have to do some rigor analysis and figure out which one suits you best. And once you find out, you can start implementing that. That is basically the domain where we can do like waterfall-styled projects, right? We create a plan, we do the analysis, we do the development, we do the testing, we deliver it, we're sort of fine. Except that doesn't really work. And I'll explain to you later. Then there's the complex zone. Now, in the complex zone, there are no good practices. So nobody or few people have done this before. Maybe somewhere else in the world, maybe at a competitor, maybe at your previous client or your previous job. You might have done it at some point in time, but there are no actual practices that we know. That means we have to find out. That means if you can set a dot at a horizon, this is where we want to go, this is our plan, and then slowly move there step by step, taking really small steps, and see if any practices will emerge, that is the stage you're in. That means that a planned approach doesn't really work in this field. Now, the fourth one is called the chaotic context. Now, in the chaotic context, there is no dot at the horizon. You don't know where you are going. You might say, how can you not know where you're going? Well, easily, if your market is being disrupted really fast, that means there is no actual time to figure out what the dotted horizon is. You might not know, right? And the only thing you can then do is take small steps and see where you end up. See if you can actually find a dotted horizon by taking steps, by moving. And that is all you can do. Now, the interesting thing is, for most of us, I'll skip through this for a bit, for the most of us, we are not in the easy fields of complicated or obvious zones. We are in the complex and chaotic zones because this is IT, and IT changes all the time, and it changes really fast. That means The author of the Cynefin framework, Dave Snowden, he says, in a chaotic context, searching for the right answers will be pointless. The relationships between cause and effect are impossible to determine because they shift constantly and no manageable patterns exist. And he also says, this is the domain which suits best to innovate. Now that matches really well with the speed at which technology changes. So this is where we need to go. And I'll give you one more example of why projects fail. I'll give you the small project that we tried to do yesterday. I'll show you. So this is Sri Lanka yesterday. We were driving in our little tuk-tuk along the roads, and we thought, this is a good idea. We were at Nuwara Eliya. I don't know if I pronounce it right, but that's where we were, right in the middle of the country. And we thought, you know what, 8 o'clock breakfast, 10 o'clock, we'll visit World's End at Horton Plains. Really beautiful site, actually, and we did that, actually. And then we said, you know what, we'll just drive in our little tuk-tuk, 200 kilometers, and even more, actually, from World's End to Colombo to attend speaker's dinner at 7 in the evening. Sounds like a decent plan, right? We figured it out. We could drive 40 kilometers an hour in the tuk-tuk, so it might have taken like 5 hours. We're safe, right? We could do this. And then we'll be at speaker's dinner around 7. Perfectly planned, right? This sounds like a waterfall project. Really good. But then reality sets in, right? So first of all, breakfast was late. That means we started later. And then we drove to Horton Plains. The roads to Horton Plains, they're terrible, right? And you have to go up the mountain. I had never driven a tuk-tuk before, and I had to drive up this really steep mountain, which is really scary stuff, actually. And then we took the walk. It's a 9-kilometer walk. We did it in 2.5 hours. We anticipated 2 hours. But again, we had to climb a lot, so it was longer. We didn't expect that, right? Stuff like this happens all the time. And then, yes, we saw World's End. It was great. There was all mist. We couldn't see anything, so really brilliant. But we met some nice people along the way, so that was a good thing, right? And they wanted to have our pictures taken and stuff like that, so good. And then we drove on. And then we had to drive off the mountain, and it started raining really heavily, which meant that our average speed that we planned for 40 kilometers an hour, we could never do that. We drove like 20 km per hour, right? Terrible stuff. And then, of course, we need to find gas all the time, because these things empty like crazy. That takes up time as well. But again, we were really happy to drive. We had to stop it sometimes for sanitary reasons and stuff like that. And then, in the end, we discovered, well, we are probably not going to make it at 7. That means we're going to change our requirements because we needed food. So we found this local restaurant along the way. And again, we met a lot of nice people. This is the owner of the restaurant, a very nice guy. And then we had to drive through traffic, and we got in the evening into Colombo. We don't have pictures of us driving in the night. But again, if you've never driven a tuk-tuk before, and Kim had to drive it all the way into the Colombo traffic, that was quite interesting. So by 10 in the evening, we could finally park our little tuk-tuk here in the garage. So there goes our plan, right? It changed big time. And the thing is, if you cannot even plan a simple trip like this, how do you think you can plan big projects? You can't, basically, right? So you have to move away from waterfall. Doesn't really work for our industry because just stuff changes all the time. There's stuff happening that you don't know of before you start doing it. So detailed plannings, you can basically throw them out of the door because they don't work in this industry. So basically, this is the message, right? You have to gonna stop doing projects because they don't work in this industry. They fail all the time. The thing you need to do is start delivering continuously. If you deliver in big chunks, let's say every quarter or every year even, the changes are so big that the amount of testing that goes into testing this orange arrow is a lot of time, which means it slows you down continuously, right? And the thing is, what will kill you is dependencies. This is an architectural graph of one of my previous clients. Every time they had a change, every rectangle, by the way, is a system in this rectangle. Every time they had a small change to their business process, they had to retest the whole landscape, which is basically terrible, and it took a lot of time. So it slowed them down continuously more and more and more. So the thing you need to do is you need to move to deploying or developing or delivering small stuff, right? Single features one by one. You push them out there all the time because the changes are so small between the previous version of that thing and the one you're trying to deliver now that the testing becomes really minimal. The effort you can put into this becomes minimal. So this is actually easier than delivering big chunks. And the thing is, well, once again, you can stop doing projects if you do this, but you can just deliver feature by feature by feature, right? That's a much more interesting approach. So the second thing is, we have to go in shorter cycles. Now, I'm not really sure how Agile, I haven't talked to everybody yet, I probably will during the rest of the day, but I'm not sure how Agile has actually moved into Sri Lanka yet, so we'll figure it out. But this is a picture of the best-known Agile approach out there, right? By the way, this is just one of the Agile approaches out there. This is Scrum. Now, in Scrum, they have defined a thing called a sprint. Now, a sprint is a given fixed time box in which you try to deliver some functionality to a certain goal, and in the end of the sprint, you will have delivered it. The problem is, again, this is hard to plan. Again, I can't even plan for a single-day trip, let alone a 2 to 4 week period. So this is what happens, right? This is where you try to plan stuff. Wait, I have this nice pointer. I hope it works. So yeah, you plan this, do all this work. This is nice, right? And then there's this ideal line. Going through your 4 weeks, I cannot do this straight after drunken too much, I guess. Tea, that is. And then in the end of the period, you still have some work left. That means you went slower than you expected. You're terrible, right? So the next sprint came along. This is actual graphs from an actual project in Belgium, by the way. So nothing against Belgium, but this is an example, right? So again, so this is their third one, and the fourth one, and the fifth one, and the sixth one. Again, all of these sprints failed, right? This is, again, an example of a smaller project, though, which still fails. Now, the thing is, you might wonder what happened if you wouldn't do these sprints at all. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, right? The interesting thing is that the Agile Manifesto, written in 2001, basically says this. It says, satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. You know what's the most important word in this definition is? It's basically the word continuous. It says, you continually add value to your customer. It doesn't say you add value every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks, every 3 months. It says continuously. So you have to figure out how to do that. And the way to do that is to move towards something called continuous delivery. Now, in the continuous delivery world, by the way, this is a nice graph. Look at this picture. It says in 2014, I'll just point it out to you. In 2014, 13% of the people who filled in this inquiry, voluntarily, by the way, did not deliver at all in the whole year, right? You haven't delivered anything into production in the whole year? What have you been doing then? And 13%, that's a lot, right? So we have to move faster. We have to move into continuous cycles. Now, I know this is Jira, and that doesn't mean I'm saying you have to use Jira, because you don't. But this is an example. This is where work items come in on the left and move out on the right. The only thing you would have to measure if you do this, if you say, my work items come in, I do the work, and then they're done, I pick up the next one, is all the time you need to measure is how fast can I go from left to right? If that's 3 days and it used to be 4 days, hey, you've gotten faster. That's not always the goal, by the way, but it's an example of how you can measure stuff. And you don't have to estimate that stuff anymore. You just move them from left to right. That's all you need to do. And yes, if this sounds to you like Kanban, it sort of is Kanban, right? The only thing is that Kanban is not a process. It does not describe how to do your work. It only says you can optimize, well, this is the single phrase definition actually, you only can optimize the process you have, improving step by step. You visualize the process, like on this board behind it, and then you try to improve from there, step by step, taking really small steps. And if you want to move to continuous delivery, that means you have to automate everything. This is a picture I took from my desk a couple of weeks ago. And the monitor you can see up there is basically all our pipelines. They're all green. It changes all the time, by the way, but it does mean that if one of them turns red, I can immediately see that from where I'm sitting, and I can immediately repair it as well. Now, that's an interesting story, right? You have to automate everything. That means automate all of your infrastructure, automate your testing. The only thing that's left is thinking about what you're doing, typing it out, write the unit test, putting it into the pipeline, and the rest should go automatically. Can you get there? Yes. I've done it, actually. It kind of works. That also means, by the way, that if you are in QA, if you are a tester, you need to be there from day one. Because having valuable tests for everything means that you can change stuff with more trust, more confidence. I love having it when all of my tests are automated and I have 100% or almost 100% code coverage. That means if I want to break stuff, I can try it out, see if my tests still are green or if they turn red. If they turn red, I need to change it again. I can see that immediately. I get immediate feedback. And immediate feedback is crucial to doing automated delivery, right? That means you have to automate all your tests. For most companies, it looks a bit like this. They have very little unit tests automatically. And then they have a bit more of integration tests, usually doing stuff like Cucumber, Selenium, whatever you do, BDD stuff. And then the rest of it is tested manually. If it's tested at all, right? That's a big problem in this industry anyway. And it needs to be different because having automated unit tests at the base, covering almost all of your code, means that you can change stuff with confidence. And that is so vital to doing this. That means in your pipelines, and this is a Jenkins pipeline, by the way. Doesn't really matter, you don't have to use Jenkins. It's the main open source pipeline tool. But all your unit testing, your static code analysis, your integration testing, your performance testing, you can automate all of that. And it saves you so much time and effort to do this. But again, it's like you have to get over a certain sort of bump in the road to be able to get there, right? And that takes considerably time. So, yes, you have to automate everything. That means manual testing. This is not, I have nothing against testers. This is just a horrible picture I found on the internet. This is not an actual tester on my team. Probably on somebody else's team, but anyway. So, automated testing needs to be. If you do that, and you go to a cycle of continuous delivering features, that means the whole cycle that's left is a bit like this. John Cutler is a nice guy who tweets a lot, and he says, well, basically, you can have like one-day sprints. It's not even a sprint, actually. You get in the morning, if you get in at all, and you don't do stand-ups. I've been doing stand-ups for over 20 years. I got a bit tired of them because I've done thousands of them, and they're always the same. It's a very good practice, but I try to stay away from them. You can have meaningful conversations with your team, right? And you do that basically the whole day, not just in the 15 minutes that are assigned to it by the project manager in the morning. And then you can agree on solving a single problem. I do that with my team every day. The only thing I say is, so what is the problem we're solving today, right? By the way, today my team is working on implementing a client class to be able to use Redis inside of our microservices. They'll solve it by the end of the day. The day's still young. And then you pair them up and you talk with each other, you show off what you do, you actually do the work. And then you go home, and well, you deliver stuff, and then you go home, and then you do the same thing tomorrow. That's all the process you actually would really need if you do this. So that means you can also stop doing projects, right? So by now, you probably got the message already. So what's next? So the next thing is, I have to talk a bit about teams. Now, teams is an interesting concept, and I'll briefly explain what I mean by that. So let's start off with some actual problems we have right now in this field. Because I believe strongly in the Agile Manifesto. I started doing Agile-like approaches in the mid-90s of the previous century, so I very much agree with everything in the Agile Manifesto. I like it a lot. From there, we grew a whole bunch of Agile approaches out there, right? Not all, well, I would say not all worthwhile, lots of valuable stuff in there. But the thing is, we moved on, and as I said, the industry is moving really fast. So that means we don't solve everything with traditional Agile stuff. Like, for instance, there is a big shortage of people in IT. That means, as a result, if you're in a project, and you're usually understaffed, right? We all know that feeling. That means we have to know about a lot of stuff. All of us, I know, well, I have depth of expertise in like software architecture and coding and design patterns and stuff like that, and a bit about Agile. And then I have to know a lot of stuff about a lot of other topics. Because I need to be able to reach into stuff like knowing about identity management, about AWS, about databases, about document databases, about NoSQL databases. I need to know a lot of stuff too, because I need to be able to fulfill that role too in my team, together with other people who might have little knowledge on the same topic too, but together we can grow from there, right? So we need to have a different approach on that. Working 9 to 5, I'm not sure how it works here, but in the Netherlands, most people I know work from 9 to 5. It seems to be a pattern a lot of other countries have. This is the highway to Amsterdam from Utrecht, where I live. At 9 in the morning, I took this picture from my car, sitting in traffic, standing still, and I have that every day. And on the other side of the road, there's people driving to Utrecht, they're also standing still on the highway. And the question is, why do we do this? My guess is, basically this model doesn't really fit well with current day society. For instance, what do most people do when they get to the office at 9? Well, they get coffee, of course, first, or maybe tea, and then they start reading their emails, right? That seems to be really vital to any of us, reading your emails. I usually only do that after lunch, like for 15 minutes, and I'm done with it. I hate reading emails. That means I get less and less emails, which is good, because I don't like email. So the thing is, you could have done this at home, right? What if 20% of the people, at least in my country, would stay at home, read their email, and then go to work? It would actually solve a lot of the traffic problems. Also, this 9 to 5, where everybody gets into traffic, it excludes a lot of people. Like people with young kids, for instance. They have a very different schedule. My kids are a bit older these days, but so they can actually drive to work themselves. But I used to be in this time bomb that actually says, well, every day in the morning I have to get up, make breakfast, and get them in the shower, get them out of the shower, make their lunch for them, and get them to school, etc., etc. It's a lot of work, right? That means I'm not being able to fit in the 9 to 5 thing. So I'm not going to do that. Also, the thing is, we are in an industry that is highly creative, right? Developers, QA people, UX designers, analysts, we all do creative work. Most of that stuff does not happen on the keyboard. So if managers think you're not working if you're not typing, and I've had managers like that, I used to put my feet up on the desk and then people say, well, you're not working. No, I'm thinking. That's work, right? Most of the things I do is actually happening inside of my head. The typing is actually only like 5 to 10% of my day. And I still write code a lot every day. Actually, I write around 50 lines of code per day. You think that's not enough? It isn't. The average developer writes around 10,000 lines of code per year, right? So on average, that means you will write like 50 lines of code per day or something like that. That's basically it. So they need to be good. So you need to think about it. Now, thinking about this stuff does not happen in this typical 9 to 5 mode. If a manager says, well, these people, you know what they do? They come in at 9 in the morning, they do some work, they go after lunch, they do some work more, and then they go home, and they do nothing for the rest of the day, and then they get back in the morning again. It's not how we work. My mind doesn't work like that. Yours probably not either, right? It works like I get in the shower in the morning, I'm like, oh, wait, that's it, right? And I sort of have a part of the solution. Then I get in my car or in the train, and I'm thinking about this. And when the time I get to the office, I figured it out. I can type it in. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't, I probably think about it at night when I'm on the couch at home or playing football somewhere, or whatever I do. And that's when my creative bubble comes up. It's not like that from 9 to 5, right? So we cannot work from 9 to 5. We should stop doing this. What I see is with a lot of people in IT, we're special, right? We're special people. We are, actually, because we're changing the world. But also, we're not always that keen on communication. So what did they do in all these agile approaches? They invent all these meetings. Like we have sprint planning meetings, refinement sessions, stand-up meetings, OKR meetings, demos, retrospectives, sprint reviews, planning poker t-shirts, etc., etc. So we have to be in meetings all day. One of the guys I'm coaching, he's an architect, and usually when I try to spend time with him, he's like, yeah, sorry, I'm off to a meeting. He's in meetings all the time. I actually try to limit being in meetings to like 3 to 4 meetings in a week. You know how much time I save by doing that? And there's lots of meetings that you actually don't have to be in, right? If you don't have a valid contribution, if there's nothing to learn from the meeting, why not stay away? It makes the meeting go faster because there's a lot less, if there's less people in meetings, they go faster because it's easier to agree. That's why I like working with really, really small teams, like 2 to 3 people. So that means all these long day refinement sessions with the whole team and stuff like that. I wouldn't do that, actually. I would stay away from it. And also, I'm not sure how it is here in Sri Lanka, but in the Netherlands and in a lot of other countries I've visited, it's kind of popular to have these open floor plans. Now, open floor plans, they kill your creativity because your mind gets flooded by stuff that comes in, by other people's conversations or music or people playing ping pong. I actually have about 10 meters from where I sit, where I have to do this creative work. There's a ping pong table, right? And there's people playing table tennis all day long, which means every time I'm thinking about something, I puck, 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 puck. It doesn't really help, right? It looks fancy and it attracts people to work for you, but it doesn't really work for me. And open floor plans are really known to kill productivity. That doesn't mean I have to put everybody in their own cubicle. It means you have to give people the freedom and the autonomy to be able to work how they want, when they want even, and how they do the work, with whom they do the work, and that's basically it. The real problem is, in Agile, autonomy becomes really popular, but it's really hard to achieve. And the thing is, it's for most people, autonomy is outside of their comfort zone. That means if we're trying to push people into being more autonomous, saying, you're now an autonomous team. You know what the first question is people ask me? They ask me, yeah, okay, but what do you want us to do? That's not true autonomy, right? That means I cannot push people into autonomy. It's not like I can teach you how to draw an owl. It's like I can say, well, here's 2 circles, but the rest you have to figure out for yourself. That's not easy for a lot of people. And also for a lot of companies. A lot of companies think that autonomy basically means that you decorate your workspace. This is not what autonomy is about. This, by the way, is in the US, but it could have been in the Netherlands as well. I'm not sure how offices look here, but I wouldn't be able to work here, right? This is terrible. Oh, look at this picture. This is Kim's leg. Kim's sitting there. I'm going to make you famous before you even start your talk, right? It's like this. She's in a job interview here at a well-known retailer in the Netherlands, highly respected, really well retailer, and they have their meeting room stuffed with these little balls. This is not IKEA, by the way. This is an official meeting room with a retailer where you do job interviews for highly respected IT jobs, right? This is terrible, right? I wouldn't want to work here. Kim didn't either, by the way. Anyway, it's still a nice company, though, but this is not how it works. The only thing I figured out is that if you want to give people autonomy, what works really well is you have to have fewer rules. Fewer rules means people feel more freedom. They have to have this actual freedom to make decisions on their own, to do what they think is best, because we are all highly educated, smart people. We can make our own decisions, right? And you cannot push people into doing that. So I took this picture, this is actually a movie clip that I made in Indonesia last year. I actually took a similar one yesterday, but I was too late to put it in. So this is me in a car. I'm not driving here, by the way. I'm lucky. This is in Medan, big city in Indonesia. And we have to cross this crossroads here. Now, if you look at all the guidance you have on the road, and I'll compare it to the European situation later, there is no guidance on the road. There's some marks here, and there's this single traffic light here, which is both red and green. I don't know what that means, by the way, but it looks dangerous to me, right? From a European perspective, traffic here is extremely dangerous. We drove the roads here yesterday, and we felt like at a lot of times that cars were driving on our lane straight into our car, and we were like, what? And then all of a sudden, they moved to their own lane, right? This is really scary stuff. But for some reason, we didn't get killed yesterday. And hopefully we won't be the rest of the week, because we like to survive. And the thing is, if you look at the Dutch situation, so this is the crossroads at my hometown. This is not a picture I took, but it is the crossroads in my hometown. As you can see, there's lines everywhere, there's signs everywhere, there's traffic lights everywhere. In Medan, this was the only traffic light I saw in a 3 million people city, right? There were no traffic lights. So what it means is people will start, and they have to communicate. Right? People honk their horns all the time here. We don't do that in the Netherlands, by the way. It's very different. We try to get used to it. It's kind of cool, right? You want to pass someone, you point, and then they're like, yeah, okay. And then you have passed them, and you point again. It's the same sound, but it has a very different meaning, right? And then it's like, wah, wah, wah. That means, oh, I want to get by, right? I want to pass you, and then or you're going too slow. So there's all sorts of these communication patterns that you have to get used to. And that is what true autonomy means, right? It means you have to start communicating. Also, in this industry, once you're autonomous, people still say, can you give us an estimate on that? Now, the only good answer on that is, no, I can't. Low-level estimation in this industry, so if you do like story points or t-shirt sizing or other this low-level stuff, it doesn't really work. And I'll show you why, or actually it doesn't add value. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but it doesn't add value. And it's because of this. This is the law of large numbers. Now, the law of large numbers says, well, I'll read it to you, it's a theorem that describes the result of performing the same experiment, so like estimation, a large number of times. According to the law, the average of the results obtained from a large number of trials should be close to the expected value. Now let me give you an example. If you throw a single dice, for 100 times, and you add up all the values, what do you think you're close to if you take the average on that? Don't say 3, by the way. It's 3.5, right? That means, what if I do this 1,000 times? I'm even closer to 3.5, if I can be any closer, right? If you do it 10,000 times, you're even more close to it. That means, if you estimate stories, or you do t-shirt sizing, or whatever you do, this low-level stuff, if you estimate it, you will end up, if you have enough stories to estimate, right in the middle. That means, well, basically it means you don't have to do this, right? You don't have to spend time playing planning poker. How nice it can be, still it doesn't have any functional value, because just counting the items instead of estimating would deliver you the same result. It would be like estimating on a scale from 1 to 1, which is a really nice scale because it's easy to estimate. You can just count everything you do instead of having to estimate it. And if you go to this continuous cycle all the time, that means that it saves you a lot of time not estimating, because you don't need to estimate it anymore. And I talked about this already, right? So that means, well, stop doing this. It doesn't add value. Have a very simple cycle. And you figure out what to do yourself. Because software development is highly complex. Actually, if you listen to Edgar Dijkstra, who was a well-known computer scientist in the 80s, he said, the programmer has to be able to think in terms of conceptual hierarchies that are much deeper than a single mind ever needed to face before. He basically said in 1986, this is the most complex field you can be in. So forget brain surgery or delivering babies or repairing cars or whatever you might do. Software development is more complex. It totally adheres to the Keynote framework, right? It says we are in an ever-changing field. That means plannable stuff is out of the door. Now, to do software development right, that means you have to have all these skills on board. If you have a small team, how do you get all these skills on board? It doesn't really work, especially if this is your stack. It doesn't really work. You have to do it differently. And then you say, well, yeah, we do Agile-like. So what does that mean? Does it mean you do Scrum? Scrum is just one of the many variations that you have out there. And the thing is, people always ask me, so does Agile scale? And I'm usually like, well, I couldn't care less, basically. I'm just working with these small teams. It works fine. I'm not going to be bothered by anything complex or enterprisey stuff. That doesn't mean I don't work for enterprises, but I'm trying to keep it small and simple, which is quite the opposite than some of these Agile or enterprise Agile frameworks do. Like, for instance, SAFe. Have you heard of SAFe? I'll show you SAFe. SAFe is an enterprise Agile framework. There's not much Agile about it, I think. And it has a lot of, oh, this is the wrong picture. This is where SAFe comes up, right? So, and it has a lot of stuff in there, a lot of enterprisey stuff. Now, if you look at the picture that I have on SAFe, I'm going to ask you a single question. Is you identify where the customer is, right? Agile, again, was about delivering value continuously to the customer. So where's the customer in this picture? This is the SAFe picture, right? And if you look really closely, you can actually identify the customer. It's this little person here on the right side of the diagram that's being hit by this train. That's not how it works, right? This is not customer centricity. And then they came up with a new version, and the new version basically is even bigger. It looks like this, right? Yes, the customer is still here. They actually put it in the middle, so they might have listened. So it's now customer-centric, because they put a circle around it now. So that kind of helps, right? And then they said, well, we're going to add a lot more stuff, so you can actually be more enterprisey. That is not the road to agility, right? This is the reverse order. And again, oh, this is nice. They added a new principle. This is just out there, right? I took this off the internet like 2 weeks ago. And they now are organized around value. Makes you wonder what they were organized around before, but that's not my problem, I guess, right? And then there's Spotify. Have you seen the Spotify model? I actually like this model a lot. But the thing is, it used to solve the puzzle for Spotify, which is a fast-growing company, double-digit growing company in Sweden. And they are actually, well, basically, it was their model for a long time, but they changed it over time. That means if you are a big bank in 2019 and saying, oh, you know what, we're going to implement the Spotify model, you're doing it wrong. because they have evolved over time. And if you're implementing some model, whether that's Spotify or something else, it's not the right way because you have to continuously move, right? The thing about this is, and this is probably one of the last statements before I move in towards the retrospective, this is, to me, the most important statement in the Agile Manifesto. It says, we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others to do it. And the most important word in the whole of the Agile Manifesto is probably this little word. It's uncovering. It means you learn all the time. And there is no other way in this field. We have to learn all the time, right? So this is where you go. You cannot just implement somebody else's model, whether that's Spotify or Safe or whoever it is, and just say, oh, this is how we work from now on, because it continuously evolves, right? And this is exactly what you need to do. And you need to stop projects. Right, one short remark is that I'll do the retrospective really briefly. Oh, yes, there we are, right? So the thing is, we are not in a plannable world. We are in an ever-changing, continuously moving, faster changing today than it is yesterday, and even faster tomorrow. That means you have to figure out approaches that fit that. And the approaches that fit that look a bit like this. You have to start implementing feature by feature instead of doing big projects. You are going to move to the shortest cycle you can have, which doesn't mean sprints are wrong. Sprints are fine. But if you are faster than that, you are more flexible, you're more adaptable, you can change even faster. You're going to do it in smaller teams, because the smaller they are, the better they communicate, the more freedom there is to do the work the way they want to. And don't interfere with that. Waterfall approaches, they go out of the door. And the most important message is, you have to think for yourself. I was in a conference in Romania, a Scrum conference, or an Agile conference actually, and they asked me this question to win a t-shirt. I love winning t-shirts, so I took the question. I said, well, Ned Stark is a senior product owner. Which approach do you think he will recommend? And I looked at it and I'm like, all four of them are sort of applicable. And I said, no, it's answer B, or C, I don't matter anymore. Because they said, this is it. They were so fixed on doing that. And the thing you need to do is, you always need to think for yourself. And from there, take baby steps in continuously change, continuously improve on what you do. Get better at it all the time, right? And then you might wonder, yes, but I'm only a developer. I'm only a QA. I'm only a PM. How can I change this thing in our company, our big organization? Well, there is only one thing you can do. It's change yourself, because it's you that drives your change. It's not somebody else. You're not going to wait for somebody else. It's you that needs to do it. If you want change, you ignite it. And the good thing is, we are in the best industry to do this, right? We're developers, we're QA people. We're in this industry that's changing the world, right? And to do that, we can never stop learning by doing it, by the way. And always, always remember to have fun, because that's basically why I'm in this industry. I still love writing code every day. I've been doing that for 37 years. Oh, by the way, did I tell you then, if you do this, you can stop doing projects? And by the way, one last remark is, if everything else fails, you tried everything, you can always remove the node modules and do an npm install, and you'll be fine. Thank you for indulging me, like 30 seconds over time. This is my last slide. My slide deck is up at the QR code on my website if you feel the need to check it and do it a little bit slower. I hope you will enjoy the rest of the conference. Have a great day. We'll be here for the rest of the day answering questions, and have fun!